Okay, go ahead.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 35th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress as shown here. Oh, and I haven't updated this page. I updated another page. But not this one. Anyway, previous episodes of this and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar series that you're interested in, including Treatise on Cosmic Fire, which is now being posted to YouTube and is available on Makara. And will be this coming Friday and every second and fourth Friday of the month. And hope you'll join us if you haven't already. Okay, I'd like to start by rereading the page that we left off on last time. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Sure, I'll start it off. And he must be acquainted with what are called hieroglyphics, and know about cosmography and geography, the position of the sun and the moon, and about the 5 planets, also the description of Egypt and the chart of the Nile, and the description of the equipment of the priests and of the place consecrated to them, and about the measures and the things in use in the sacred rites. Then the storekeeper follows those previously mentioned with the cubit of justice and the cup for libations. He is acquainted with all points called fidutic, relating to training, and moschophaltic, sacrificial. There are also 10 books which relate to the honor paid by them to their gods and containing the Egyptian worship, as that relating to sacrifice, first fruits, hymns, prayers, processions, festivals, and the like. And behind all walks the prophet, with the water vase carrying openly in his arms, who is followed by those who carry the issue of loaves. He, as being the governor of the temple, learns the 10 books called hieratic, and they contain all about the laws and the gods and the whole of the training of the priests. For the prophet is, among the Egyptians, also over the distribution of the revenues. There are then 42 books of Hermes, indispensably necessary, of which the 6 and 30 contain the whole philosophy of the Egyptians are learned by the aforementioned personages, and the other 6, which are medical, by the pastoparophy, the image bearers, treating of the structure of the body and of disease, and instruments and medicines, and about the eyes, and the last about women.
Thanks, BL. Okay, so last time we talked about the temple singers. We were in the middle of this passage that BL just read, whose songs invoke the presence of deity. And there's a number of wonderful artworks that show these temple singers. The astrologer, who knew the fixed stars and the cycles of the sun and the moon. The scribe, who was versed in hieroglyphics, geography, and sacred measurements. The storekeeper, who carried the royal cubit and was the teacher of acolytes and all things related to sacrifice. Then a description of 10 books on the gods and all things related to their worship, followed by the prophet carrying a water vase, which brings us up to where we left off last time. So next up, who is followed by those who carry the issue of loaves. those had a specific ceremonial meaning in Egyptian rituals. So let's read about that. Can we get a reader?
Yes, and Veronica, can you read that for us, please? There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
In the next chapter, there is a scene of eating and drinking. The speaker, who personates the god, says, I am the Lord of bread in Anu. My bread at the heaven was that of Ra. My bread on earth was that of Seb. By the cabin I come into the house of the great god of Anu. The 7 loaves represent the bread of Ra. Elsewhere, the number prescribed to be set on one table as an offering is 5 loaves. These are also carried on the head of 5 different persons in the scene of the underworld. 5 loaves may be the bread of Seb, as Seb is number 5, and his gods are 5. Thus, 5 loaves will represent the bread of earth, and 7 the bread of heaven. Be that it, excuse me, I've got something in the middle. Be that as it may, both the 5 loaves and the 7 are sacred regulation numbers in the Egyptian ritual. And in the Gospel of Matthew, the miracles are wrought with 5 loaves in the one case and 7 in the other, when the multitudes are fed on a celestial diet, the natural genesis.
Thank you. Did you see my screen of participants jump up when I did that just now during that reading?
Yes, something popped up.
Okay, because that's supposed to be invisible, but it wasn't. Okay, good to know.
I don't think I saw it, but I did see a video someone was showing and I was turning it off about the time that happened. So.
Oh, maybe that was it then, because let me just do this as a test. I'm putting on, do you see that screen? Do you see my participants list?
I see my participants list. Let me close it and then. Okay,
No,
now try.
I don't see anything at this moment.
Okay, that's how.
No.
Just good to know, because sometimes I'm checking a status or something, so it's good to know. It's not supposed to show, but when you said something's on my screen, it must have been just coincidental. So, okay. Seb, also called Geb and Keb, is the hereditary deity of the gods. In early writing, he was the god of the earth. Later, he became the god of the dead, representing the earth in which the deceased was buried, or more esoterically, the substance of which all human beings are formed. It was popularly believed that earthquakes were caused by Seb's laughter. Next, we learned that the prophet is also the governor of the temple, trainer of priests, administrator of the law, and distributor of revenues, and was thus second only to the Pharaoh. So could we get a reader of this passage about the priests and priestesses, including the captions, please?
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The high priest of each great city, and sometimes even the high priestess, bore a special title. In Thebes, or the high priest was called first servant of the god Ra in Thebes. In Heliopolis, the title of the high priest was Great One of Visions of Ra-Tem. In Memphis, great chief of the hammer in the temple of him of the southern wall, and Setem of the god of the beautiful face, i.e. Ptah. In Sais, governor of the double temple, and similarly, the high priestess of Memphis bore the title of Nefertutu. In Sekhem, that title of the high priestess was Divine Mother.
And so to the left here, we have a granite statue of Roy, who was a high priest of Amun during the final years in the reign of Ramses II. So these are extremely important personages. And then over here we have the priestess Merit, lived during the reigns of Tutankhamun, and Horemheb. Okay.
And Veronica says Heliopolis is the city of the sun. Oops, just lost it.
The literal meaning.
The sun in Greek. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the literal meaning of that. Yes, indeed. Okay, and next up. The last paragraph, the subsection on the mutilated hermetic fragments. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry.
This is still your description of that last sentence.
Yeah, right. So, these last 6 books, including the one about women, were the pastophori, or image bearers, who, given their description, were healers. All that I could read about them described them as healers, though the term itself, pastophori, refers more particularly to image bearers. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Pastophori, from the Greek words pastos, a couch or chest, and pharaoh, meaning I bear, equivalent to couch bearers. The priests of the first class in the Egyptian mysteries bore this name. In the performance of certain ceremonies, they carried an image of a god Osiris, whose allegorical death had been represented on an enclosed couch, or rather perhaps in a kind of coffin. This title was also applied to other persons who carried images of their deities through the public streets for the purpose of eliciting charity. General History of Freemasonry, 284.
Thank you, Karen. So thoughts or questions on anything in this passage about these? It's actually just the end of a long paragraph that describes the 42 books being born by these particular types, each of them with a skill set that was elucidated in the books they carried. It's quite interesting.
So in the picture that you showed of the priestess, a couple slides back, what was she holding in her hand? What is she holding in her hand?
That looks like, let's see, that's trying to think which goddess that is. It's just slipping my mind. It's the double horns, and then you have the moon. It's a moon goddess. Who is it? Yeah, good, Scott. Who is that, Scott?
Is it Taurus? I mean,
No, it's Isis, I believe. Both of them show Isis in 2 different forms.
Isis. Okay.
And then there is, the priestess is also carrying that the necklace. I'm pulling a blank on that too. That has the counterweight that hangs down behind the back. It's noted by the bottom of what she's holding there is what hangs down at the front usually. So I think they're both Isis.
Okay. And, very often a certain aspect of a goddess or god would have a certain depiction, especially in things like headgear, and then it would be given a different name, even though it would be an aspect of the overarching goddess, like in this case, Isis.
If it's not Isis, it could be Hathor too, because that.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's Hathor because this is Hathor for sure.
Yeah, that's Hathor one, right? And the other one seems to go back and forth for what I know.
Right.
Yeah, Vivian agrees with you that it's Hathor.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. Thanks, Scott.
And then while
Dan?
we're on this, Greg wants to know, are there priestesses associated with the Oracle of Delphi too?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, well, it was a priestess who sat in that seat there was a tripod above the fumes. And then through that was able to channel the voice of Apollo or other gods and answer questions. It's quite famous for that. My guess is that there were also priestesses in connection with that main oracle. And in fact, it was a whole temple complex. And the center of that was the oracular cave at Delphi. I was there. It's quite a place to visit. Anyone else?
Yes, Yvonne wants to know, what about the hair? Is it a wig?
Oh, that's a good question. We're talking about over here, huh? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I've never heard any description of that. I've read a lot about the Egyptian ritual, and I haven't read that it was or wasn't a wig. I don't know. Anyone else know or have a thought about that? Okay.
That's all I see right now.
Okay, let's see. Let's get back to where we were. We talked about that last passage. Okay, next up is the last paragraph in this subsection on the mutilated. You can see over here, last little paragraph on the mutilated Hermetic fragments. Could we get a reader for this short paragraph?
Kirsten, can you read that for us, please? Okay, first off, Kirsten says, I have learned that they had short haircuts and that they wore wigs.
Could well be like just given the climate, you know, if nothing else.
Yeah. And then Kirsten, can you read that for us, please, that page? I don't see her unmuting, so Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes.
No.
What? Oh, go ahead, Kirsten. Go ahead.
One of the greatest tragedies of the philosophic world was the loss of nearly all of the 42 books of Hermes mentioned in the foregoing. These books disappeared during the burning of Alexandria, for the Romans and later the Christians realized that until these books were eliminated, they could never bring the Egyptians into subjection. The volumes which escaped the fire were buried in the desert, and their location is now known to only a few initiates of the secret schools.
Thank you, Kirsten. Okay, aside from the comment that the loss of nearly all the 42 books of Hermes was a great tragedy, this short paragraph is completely conjectural. It is likely that many of the books in the Alexandrian library were Hermetic. Remember, 42, the number 42 is most probably a symbolic number of completion. But there is no record of the contents of the famed library. And did the influence of the Hermetic literature inspire the burning of the library? I suppose it's possible. But again, there's no record of this. And finally, we can only hope that there were such volumes buried in the desert to be found when humanity is once again ready for such a revelation. After all, many important finds since MPH wrote these words have been made in the Egyptian desert, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi cache, etc. But again, there's no evidence that these were buried. So thoughts about anything in this short paragraph? You know, this was a 26-year-old MPH, a most precocious esoteric student, but sometimes he would take liberties. Okay, before we move into the next subsection, let's take a look at the illustration in the middle of page 38 of the folio edition. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Martha, can you read that,
Uh-huh.
please?
Yes. Thoth, the ibis-headed. It is doubtful that the deity called Thoth by the Egyptians was originally Hermes, but the two personalities were blended together, and it is now impossible to separate them. Thoth was called the Lord of the divine books and the scribe of the company of the gods. He is generally depicted with the body of a man and the head of an ibis. The exact symbolic meaning of this latter bird has never been discovered. A careful analysis of the peculiar shape of the ibis, especially its head and beak, should prove illuminating. Couldn't it be that Thoth was mythic and Hermes was an earthbound?
What does mythic mean?
That he wasn't ever an embodied form.
Well, I would agree with that. I think mythic sometimes is used to mean false or not true. And I think that would not be the case, that Thoth was definitely a deity in truth and in fact, and he overshadowed, much like the Christ overshadowed Jesus, Hermes. You know, that's my understanding after what I've read about it. So yeah. So first, it is doubtful that the deity called Thoth by the Egyptians was originally Hermes, but the two personalities were blended together, and it's now impossible to separate them. As mentioned before, most historians agree that there were two Hermes. Could we get it, just to refresh our memories on this teaching, could we get a reader for this, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
There are two persons of the name of Hermes mentioned in sacred history. The first is the divine Hermes, called by the Romans Mercury. Among the Egyptians, he was known as Thoth. Diodorus Siculus describes him as the secretary of Osiris. He is commonly supposed to have been the son of Mizraim, and Cumberland says that he was the same as Osiris. There is, however, much confusion among the mythologists concerning his attributes. The second was Hermes Trismegistus, or the thrice great, who was a celebrated Egyptian legislator, priest, and philosopher, who lived in the reign of Ninus, about the year of the world 2670.
And I don't know what that means. You know, I tried to pull this reference up in some other way. What is the year of the world? Do you know, anybody? I don't. You know, it's not BC, and I could not find the reign of Ninus in any other reference. So it's just, there you have it.
Are we measuring from 4000 BC? So one of those things?
Yeah, it's gonna, yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. The year of the world starting in, but we don't have that date.
30, which is the time of King Tut. So that doesn't.
And that's, it's possible. Yeah, you know, that would, it would also put it back into, you know, the times most often ascribed to Hermetic literature, that kind of 1300 BC place, but who knows?
Has to be much older than that.
I'm sorry, say again.
Has to be much older than
that. You know, add a zero, right?
Start there, yeah.
You start there and then adjust backwards, right? Yeah, so often what Scott and I are talking about is so often these esoterically, especially if you read the Secret Doctrine, you find that so many of the attributions as to the age of the ancients, particularly Egypt, are much, much older than are given. Okay, next up. Thoughts or questions on, yeah, let's go into this. This is the statement about Thoth's relation to the ibis. The exact symbolic meaning of the ibis was almost certainly a secret of the Egyptian priesthood, secret of initiation. But the subject of the ibis's symbolical meaning has not gone unexplored. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Livingstone describes the ibis flying by night and crying, ah, ah, a duplicate equivalent in Egyptian to Ati, the name of the moon god, who was represented by the ibis, and who was the lunar tongue, mouth, or speech of the gods. The moon is considered to be masculine in Egyptian mythology, but Ati was also a goddess. In the ritual we read, I am the woman, the orb, hour of darkness. I have brought my orb in darkness. It is changed to light. I have prepared Thoth, or Thoth, I think, at the gate of the moon. Its feathers are on my body. Here the woman is the bringer forth, apparently under the feathered or ibis image. And Thoth, as the young moon, is her messenger.
Okay,
The natural
thank you.
genesis.
Yeah, that's just from Gerald Massey. Any thoughts about this? Any questions? That was a nice demonstration of Good job. Good job. I was really struck by how similar these, this ancient Egyptian bas-relief and, just a modern photograph of an ibis, and it's the same thing going on, Okay, on to the next subsection, which is entitled The Book of Thoth. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Okay, but first, Efrosini says the word Hermes refers to the interpreter, hermeneutic, the higher mind that reveals the world of meaning. Perhaps the scribe or Thoth with the penetrating beak alludes to the faculty of man to use the gift of symbols and language.
I really like that. Thank you. Yeah, good thoughts there. Yeah, also you have to wonder, is there something in this beak about the writing instrument, just the similarity of a writing instrument of that time. That's pretty exoteric, but maybe that might have been part of it. But yeah, before he was talking about is Thoth the scribe of Osiris or Osiris himself? And once you've read a lot of esoteric literature, you realize that the answer to that is yes. It can be both. That the scribe suggests the third aspect, the manifesting aspect of the unmanifest, right? So Osiris being the god and Thoth being the recorder of that which the god impresses upon humanity. Okay, yeah, anything else? Okay, on to the Book of Thoth. It's just a short little section, 3 paragraphs.
Right. Eleonora, can you read that for us, please?
Sure, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. The Book of Thoth. While Hermes still walked the earth with men, he entrusted to his chosen successors the sacred Book of Thoth. This work contained the secret processes by which the regeneration of humanity was to be accomplished, and also served as the key to his other writings. Nothing definite is known concerning the contents of the Book of Thoth, other than that its pages were covered with strange hieroglyphic figures and symbols, which gave to those acquainted with their use unlimited power over the spirits of the air and the subterranean divinities. When certain areas of the brain are stimulated by the secret processes of the mysteries, the consciousness of man is extended and he is permitted to behold the immortals and enter into the presence of the superior gods. The Book of Thoth described the method whereby this stimulation was accomplished. In truth, therefore, it was the key to immorality.
Immortality. There is a slight difference.
Sorry.
Okay. While Hermes still walked the earth with men, he entrusted his chosen successors the sacred book of Thoth. G.R.S. Mead is a great source for all things Hermetic. Lists Hermes' chosen successors. Could we get a reader for this quote?
OMG. Okay. Vivian, are you up to this task?
I don't know. Yeah, I'll try. Oh gosh. Ficinus traces what the Hindus call the Guru Parampara chain, or succession of teachers, as follows. In things pertaining to theology, there were in former times 6 great teachers expounding similar doctrines. The first was Zoroaster, the chief of the Magi. The second, Hermes Trismegistus, the head of the Egyptian priesthood. Orpheus succeeded Hermes. Aglaophamus was initiated into the sacred mysteries of Orpheus. Pythagoras was initiated into theology by Aglaophamus, and Plato by Pythagoras. Plato summed up the whole of their wisdom in his letters.
Thank you. So any thoughts about this or questions? Okay, next up. This work contained the secret processes by which the regeneration of humanity was to be accomplished, and also served as the key to his other writings. This is quite a statement. 20 years later, MPH expanded on this description of the Book of Thoth in his Horizon magazine. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. The Book of Thoth is famous among the ancient annals of magic. It was conceived to be a most potent work, resplendent with spiritual power. Only the highest grade of initiates were permitted to gaze upon the curious hieroglyphics which it contained. So majestic were these sacred symbols that but to look upon them was to be elevated to the highest parts of wisdom. The book was kept in a golden casket, the key to which was part of the insignia of the high priest. I was wondering in that last slide, that's part of the brain that was stimulated, if that would be, what part would that be? The pineal, the thymus? Well, the thymus isn't in the brain, but the pineal, or?
I would say the pineal, yeah, for sure. You know, but you're also talking about etheric levels here, and also the mental sheath, pineal. So it would be etheric on the physical plane, but also etheric mental, etheric astral, and you would get just a stream that would come straight down in.
Okay.
So whenever you see a statement like this right here, there's at least a possibility that the text was in Sinzar, right? When, you know, that the symbols were so majestic, but that to look on them was to be elevated, it's just what you were pointing out. You're probably looking at a form of language where instead of it being representative through a series of letters, it's a directly connected ideograph, right? And that's what Sinzar is known to be. The thing is, you have to be an initiate of some standing before you can even read it. Okay. So next, a statement about the powers bestowed on the reader by the Book of Thoth. According to a story popular in Hellenistic times, Setna, one of the sons of Ramses II, became obsessed with finding the Book of Thoth in order to gain these powers. So even in ancient times, it was known for being the bestower of powers. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Okay, hold on a minute. Greg says, I think it relates very deeply. I think he's talking about Censar. It relates very deeply to cuneiform, the first written language in the world, primarily based on symbolic meanings.
Yeah, and it also has some elements that are connected with Sanskrit, but ideographs are often just inherently closer to the source. So yeah. Okay, reader, please.
Oops, sorry. Tia, can you read that for us, please?
Setna, times Reset, is a recurring character in ancient Egyptian literature. One of the sons of Ramses II, Setna was an accomplished magician, statesman, scholar, and something of an adventurer. That he existed is no question, but like King Arthur and other quasi-historical figures, his exploits have been inflated over the years. This story dates to several centuries following the reign of Ramses. By this time, stories of Setna had reached epic proportions, and the former court scribe was elevated to the status of mythic hero. This is one of the more complete stories told about him, and certainly one of the best. Loudly do the people sing of Setna, son of the great Ramses, most learned man in Egypt. A great scholar, he was able to read all of the old writings and decipher the most ancient texts. No symbol in Egypt was unknown to him, even the ones on the walls of the crumbling temples from the oldest of days. He was also a mighty magician, perhaps the mightiest in Egypt, for he had learned the magical arts from the secret text that not even the priest of Amun-Ra could read.
Thank you. And another reader, please.
Okay, Fred, can you read that, please? Well, I don't see him unmuting, so. iPhone has volunteered to read. I'm sorry, I don't know iPhone's name.
That's all right, as long as they can read.
Okay, they are not unmuting though. Okay, there goes Fred.
Good. It took
One day he read in a crumbling scroll about another son of another pharaoh who had been a scribe and magician, Nephrekepta, the son of Amenhotep. He had lived 300 years earlier and had been regarded as the mightiest magician in Egypt, for he had found and read the Book of Thoth, the secrets of the God of wisdom. The Book of Thoth was a collection of magic that would enable the reader to know the language of the animals, to cast great spells, even to enchant the sky and the earth itself. Setna desired the book for himself, that he too might drink of its knowledge. He learned that it had been buried with Nephrekepta at the Memphis necropolis. Setna sought his brother, the mighty Anahiru, and asked him for help. I will go with you, my brother, said Anahiru. I shall be your sword and shield.
Okay, so they set off on an adventure, and what follows is a full-blown vision quest. It takes several pages. We can't read through it, but I'll describe it. So Setna seeks and finds the Book of Thoth in the tomb of Prince Naneferkapta. Against the wishes of Naneferkapta's spirit, or Ka, who is there in the tomb with him and appears to him, Setna takes the book and is cursed for breaking a law laid down by Thoth himself. Setna then meets a transcendently beautiful woman who seduces him into killing his children in sacrifice to her. Following this horrific deed, the woman immediately takes on the appearance of a corpse, and Setna realizes, remember, he was a great magician himself, that she was an illusion created by Neferkapta, guardian of the Book of Thoth. Recognizing his error and in fear of further retribution, Setna returns the book to Neferkapta's tomb, which is immediately swallowed by the Egyptian desert. He then returns home to find his family intact. Perhaps it is on this story that MPH bases his statement, the volumes which escaped the fire were buried in the desert, and their location is now known to only a few initiates of the secret schools. So that's the great story. Any thoughts or questions?
Yes, we have a number of them, but I'm going to go to the bottom of the list first. Anne Veronica says, necropolis means the city of the dead. Nekros is dead in Greek.
Thank you.
And then let me go back up now to Ephrazini says, according to myth handed down by Plato to Phaedrus, Thoth was the first to give humans written language. And she asks, do you know the myth? And then she actually gives it to us down there.
What, in the chat box?
Uh-huh.
Let's see here.
You want me to read it?
Let's see, I'm looking at it. It's Ephrazini, sorry. Why don't you read it, Ephrazini? You want to read it to us?
Yes. One day, Thoth visited Thamus, king of Egypt, urging him to disseminate the arts as astronomy, geometry around Egypt. For each art that Thoth presented, Thamus offered his praise and criticism. When it came to writing, Thoth said, "O king, here is something that once learned will make the Egyptians wiser and will improve their memory. I have discovered a potion for memory and for wisdom." But Thamus replied that as the father of writing, Thoth's affection for writing had kept him from acknowledging the truth about writing. In fact, Thamus asserted, writing increases forgetfulness rather than memory. Instead of internalizing and understanding things, students will rely on writing as a potion for reminding. Moreover, students will be exposed to many ideas without properly thinking about them. Thus, they will have an appearance of wisdom, while for the most part, they will know nothing.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a famous quote about the downside of the written word, right? It's say that somebody much more contemporary said something like, if you have one book, you'll know that book. If you have a whole library, you won't know any book, right? So it's the same idea. And you could see how it would be true that when students, the only way you would be able to hold the knowledge was to remember it. You would be at a whole other level of acuteness that is, in our time, pretty much gone, So interesting. Thank you, Ephrazini. Okay, let's see, where are we here?
All right, we have one more comment.
That's fine.
And Veronica says, can Sensar be written down? I have an image that they are woven from light, a three-dimensional light, like a hologram, and emitting some kind of vibration that stimulates the mind. She says it's just a thought.
Good intuition. That's the way I always thought of Sensar too, is the way you're describing it, as it's like something you would see in a vision, and it'd be given you like an impression on your consciousness, and you would see that, except in the case of those who have access to the records, for instance, the hierarchical records which are written in Sensar. But then there's this peculiar story. Those of you who have been in my Secret Doctrine webinar series, where somebody who's trying to get something on HPB steals some of her notes that seemed full of hieroglyphs, and turn them over to the police, trying to prove that she was a spy. And HPB said she got a really good laugh at it because it was just a page of her Sinzar that she had taken from, taken down notes from the master. So that suggests that Sinzar can literally be written on a page. Who knows? But yeah, your description of Sinzar has always been my sense of how it is. The thing about it is that the viewing of the symbols literally promotes, creates, facilitates a vision of the truth of what the symbol is representing. It's not a lower mind function. It's a direct intuitional function, right? That's my understanding of what's particular about it. Okay, so did Setna really find the Book of Thoth? Historically, we might as well ask if Parsifal really found the Holy Grail. Both are teaching stories and with many similarities. Okay, next up. When certain areas of the brain are stimulated, the consciousness of man is extended. He's permitted to behold the immortals. We've been talking about this. The Book of Thoth describes the method whereby this stimulation was accomplished. And therefore, in truth, it was the key to immortality. So the Egyptian Book of the Dead actually describes the effects of reading the Book of Thoth. Could we get a reader for this, including the caption, please?
Andrea, can you read that for us, please?
Yeah. The caption is, Nefertari stands in front of the seated god Thoth with the head of an ibis. The text behind Nefertari is from chapter 94 of the Book of the Dead. In the 94th chapter of the Book of the Dead, the deceased addresses the guardian of the Book of Thoth and says, quote, I am endowed with glory. I am endowed with strength. I am filled with might, and I am supplied with the books of Thoth, and I have brought them to enable me to pass through the god Akkar, who dwelleth in Set. I have brought the palette and the inkpot as being the objects which are in the hands of Thoth. Hidden is that which is in them. Behold me in the character of a scribe, O Hero Khuti. Thou didst give me the command, and I have copied what is right and true, and I do bring it unto thee each day, unquote. In the vignette of the chapter, we see the deceased seated with a palette and an inkpot before him, the gods of the Egyptians.
Well, it brings up, we could spend the entire rest of the webinar just exploring the possibilities here, and the symbolic language that's used, right? And we see another guardians of the reference of Thoth, just like Setna ran across, in the tomb. So it's quite amazing, really. And of course, my take on the Book of Thoth is that this is going to be, Egypt was a very magically oriented civilization. To be able to affect results based on your teaching, upon your knowledge. But then, as is now the case, you had to be an initiate in order to come across, in order to be, let's see, in order for the Book of Thoth to be revealed to you would be at a certain level of initiation, right? Okay.
I have a couple of comments.
Sure.
My favorite is Anne Veronica's, but hold on a minute. Eleonora, and this was in relation to the discussion on censor, I believe. She says the tarot is capable of subconscious effects.
Yeah, it is. And so are all symbols. Yes, indeed.
Which brings us to Anne Veronica's question. She says, okay, what is the frog doing there? You see it there in the middle of the picture?
Right, yes. Oh, the frog was the pet of the artist, and he just wanted to get him in there one way or another, you know. Now, I have no idea. If anybody knows, you get 3 gold stars. No, I can't pull anything up. I don't know. I should have done my homework, shouldn't I? I really should know what that frog is. And it's sort of mostly a frog, but it's very odd.
Okay, and then Yvonne's got her hand up, but hold on a minute, Yvonne. Greg says, don't they have an association as personality or as the soul of Egypt being related to the 4th ray?
Let's see.
I'd have to look in.
Well, you know, you have it right in Hermes. You know, the Mercury as Hermes is the 4th ray planet. So you certainly are going to, you know, whether they knew rays as rays, you certainly have that energy as dominating through the fact of Hermes. I just have a theory about the frog, which is that it's at home on both land and water, and often amphibious creatures were used, and I know this is true in Egypt, to represent the ability to transcend from one element to another. So now, is that actually what the frog is sitting there for? I don't know. Maybe he's the go-between, you know, that allows this being to have an experience of this being, you know, translating to the next plane, but it's, you know, pure conjecture. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Yvonne's got her hand up.
Okay.
What does Nefertari have on her head?
That's a vulture, which was sacred in Egypt, representative of the sun, the solar reality. Anyone else? And
Scott says the same is true of ibis, of sea, land, and air.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Sea, land, and air. That's true. Yeah. Anyone else? All right. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, I'll start over again. According to legend, the Book of Thoth was kept in a golden box in the inner sanctuary of the temple. There was but one key, and this was in the possession of the master of the mysteries, the highest initiate of the Hermetic Arcanum. He alone knew what was written in the secret book. The Book of Thoth was lost to the ancient world with the decay of the mysteries, but its faithful initiates carried it sealed in the sacred casket into another land. The book is still in existence and continues to lead the disciples of this age into the presence of the immortals. No other information can be given to the world concerning it now, but the apostolic succession from the first Hierophant, initiated by Hermes himself, remains unbroken to this day, and those who were peculiarly fitted to serve the immortals may discover this priceless document if they will search sincerely and tirelessly for it.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, first up, according to legend, the Book of Thoth was kept in a golden box in the inner sanctuary of the temple. So the above cited legend of Setna gives us more detail. We're back to Setna again. Could we get a reader? Just a short quote, though.
Anne Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
In the middle of the Nile at Coptos, guided by snakes and scorpions and a mighty serpent, who cannot be killed, in an iron box in which there is a bronze box in which there is a wooden box, in which there is an ivory and an ebony box, in which there is a silver box, in which there is a golden box. There you shall find the book of Thoth. Legend of Setna.
Okay, well, we could talk about this passage, but I want to bring this up. So it lists 6 boxes, right? Or vehicles for the book of Thoth itself, the 7th, which brings to mind the 7 sheaves of a human being and the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, right? And, you know, if you think about, for instance, Ishtar traveling down, leaving her crown when she goes from the first plane to the second, and then leaving her earrings, and then, you know, bracelets, and each time losing a part of her essential self, you could say, as she progressed downward, you know, into the underworld in order to, in a sense, rescue the personality, right? So it's just curious that you have this exact same 7 levels, with the book of Thoth, of course, at the very highest, at the level of the sea of fire. Right? And since it gives you dominion over all physical plane reality, it seems, you know, more than coincidental. And then, of course, you also have the idea of the sheaths of a human being here, you know, as described. This is old theosophy, but the same would be true in DK speak. Yeah, but I wanted to just comment on this a little bit. You know, whenever you see, you know, okay, you can still be on the physical plane when it's just guarded by snakes and scorpions, right? But as soon as you get to a mighty serpent who cannot be killed, you're looking at a symbolic language. And it suggests that this place is located off the physical plane, right? So just, you know, keep that in mind. All right, any thoughts or questions about these ideas we've talked about here? Symbolic language is just so wonderful, you know, it's just terrific. Okay, next, there was but one key, and this was in the possession of the Master of the Mysteries, the highest initiate of the Hermetic Arcanum. He alone knew what was written in the secret book. So this master was Hermes himself initially, probably overshadowed by Thoth. Whether succeeding masters of the temple were high initiates of the Hermetic Arcanum is unknown. If they would have had to be initiates of a certain degree in order to truly bear the key. So the key to the golden box is, of course, a metaphor, not unlike the door of initiation. HPB says, occult philosophy has 7 keys and explains that which science fails to see, which kind of brings this back to mind, you know, the idea that every box, you know, that there was a key, quote unquote, to each box, therefore to each level, right? Okay, let's see. By the way, it's thundering and lightning outside. So if suddenly I disappear, it wasn't because I just decided to leave. I would have been cut off. Occasionally that happens during a lightning storm here. We lose electricity. So I would hate it if that happens, but
we do hear it.
Yeah, you can hear it in the background. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so next, the Book of Thoth. Oh, wait a minute.
Hold on just 1 second. Scott says ivory and ebony, white and black on the 4th plane of booty, with white keys above the black keys below.
Ooh, yeah. White above the black. Yes. Yes, indeed. And it just seems so much like metaphors for the different levels, don't they? Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Yeah. Did you want to interpret your own statement more than that?
No.
That, huh?
The white and the black could be switched too, depending upon if we're talking about absolute light or phenomenal light. But just the fact that it's in the middle
Mhm.
with two.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah.
Perhaps.
Okay. Okay, next. The book is still in existence and continues to lead the disciples of this age into the presence of the immortals. From an archaeological point of view, this is conjectural at best. But as a philosophical statement, it is now and will always be true. For the book, quote unquote, has taken and will take many forms, depending on people's readiness and the need of the times. Believe me, there is not some book that gives you the key to all of nature, laying in a box in the desert that just anyone could stumble across. That's a very exoteric way of understanding these teachings, right? Yeah. In some ways, the whole saga of Setna is meant to reveal that truth. Okay, finally, where are we here? Yeah, hang on a sec. Next, the Book of Thoth was lost to the ancient world with the decay of the mysteries, but its faithful initiates carried it sealed in the sacred casket to another land. Another metaphor. The actual Book of Thoth is probably held in the archives of the hierarchy. My guess is that it's an ancient Censar document that was revealed to and translated by Hermes and was then withdrawn at the end of an Egyptian golden era, to be revealed in part and in another form at a later time. Possibly this took form in the school of Hermes' successors, Orpheus, Aglaophamus, and Pythagoras, and Plato. Could we get a reader for this about Plato, please?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
The doctrine of Plato was epic making in the history of human genius, but it was not his own invention. For realizing that there is no truth apart from religion, he went to consult the priests of Memphis and to obtain initiation into their mysteries. In Egypt, however, his initiation could have been imperfect only, for the priests by that time had themselves forgotten the import of their primeval hieroglyphics, as is indicated by the history of that priest who spent 3 days in deciphering a heretic inscription found in the tomb of Alcmene, and sent by Agesilaus, king of Sparta. Cornuphus, who was doubtless the most learned among the hierophants, consulted the old collections of signs and characters. In the end, he found that the inscription was in the script of Proteus, using the Grecian name of the Book of Thoth, consisting of movable hieroglyphics capable of variations as numerous as there are possible combination of characters, numbers, and elementary figures. But the Book of Thoth, being the key of oracles and the elementary work on science, should not have involved such long research before its signs were identified. If Cornuphus had been really proficient in the sacerdotal art. Another proof that primeval truths were obscured at this period is the fact that the oracles which registered their protest on the subject were in a style that was understood no longer. The history of magic.
Yeah, we forget, that during the Egyptian era, more time passed than has passed since the Egyptian era. It was an extraordinarily long period of time. And so much was lost, even from one era within Egyptian history to the next. Any thoughts or questions about this? All right. So next, the book is still in existence and continues to lead the disciples from this age into the presence of the immortals. No, I said that. Finally, sorry guys. Finally, no other information can be given in the world concerning it. But the apostolic succession from the first Hierophant remains unbroken to this day. And those who are peculiarly fitted may discover this priceless document if they will search sincerely and tirelessly. This is quite a statement and is in perfect alignment with the theosophical teachings on spiritual succession. As has always been the case, fitting, quote unquote, oneself to serve the immortals requires decentralization, soul infusion, and a development of the intuition. Okay, next up. Could we get a reader, please? This is the last paragraph on this. The Book of Thoth may be the most important single document that came, but since none of it survives, not a lot was said. The next section is quite lengthy. So this last paragraph, please.
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. It has been asserted that the Book of Thoth is in reality the mysterious Tarot of the Bohemians, a strange emblematic book of 78 leaves which has been in possession of the gypsies since the time when they were driven from their ancient temple, the Serapum. According to the secret histories, the gypsies were originally Egyptian priests. There are now in the world several secret schools privileged to initiate candidates into the mysteries, but in nearly every instance, they lighted their altar fires from the flaming torch of Hermes in his Book of Thoth revealed to all mankind the one way, and for ages the wise of every nation and every faith have reached immortality by the way, established by Hermes in the midst of the darkness for the redemption of humankind.
Thank you, Greg. So first, the statement that the Book of Thoth is the Tarot. There is no evidence that this is true, external evidence. It is, of course, possible that after holding Hermes' greatest of all writings secret for millennia, the quote-unquote gypsies reintroduced it in the 15th century, in 15th century Milan, through a series of 78 pictorial symbols. But the truth is, the Tarot has itself evolved significantly since its introduction, reaching its height in the 19th century through such texts as the Builders of the Aditum and the controversial Crowley deck, which is literally called the Thoth Tarot. I'm not a Tarot expert, but I've studied it, as I'm sure many of you have. And I've studied enough to know that it has profound depth of meaning. Now, whether the source of this meaning is somehow related to the Book of Thoth is a debate that I'm sure will continue. The Serapim, you may remember from our study of the god Serapis, was among the last of the great Egyptian temples of Alexandria. Next, there are now in the world several secret schools privileged to initiate candidates into the mysteries, but in nearly every instance, they lighted their altar fires from the flaming torch of Hermes. So the influence of Hermes initially spread into Greece through his immediate successors, and from there influenced the entire Western world. As to the secret schools, we can, of course, have no knowledge, but usually where there is an outer school, there is an esoteric counterpart. Sometimes we know about the esoteric counterpart, even though we don't know any of the specifics, but we know enough to know that it existed. For instance, the school in Samothrace, there's almost nothing known, a couple of sculptural fragments, and then the amazing winged Samothracian sculpture, but we don't know anything of the teachings of it. Okay, and finally, Hermes in his book of Thoth revealed to all mankind the one way. And for ages, the wise of every nation and every faith have reached immortality by the way established by Hermes. Okay, through the book of Thoth, Hermes introduced the way to the ancient Egyptian civilization. But this was a reintroduction, for the way has been stated and restated by avatars in every age and will continue to be stated and restated. In my opinion, the latest iteration of that is Theosophy, started by HPB, reiterated by DK. Okay. Yeah, let's, first of all, we'll read this before we go on. Reader, please.
Martha, can you read that, please?
Here we go. The very old book is the original work from which the many volumes of Kiti were compiled. Not only this latter and the Sifra Zeniota, but even the Sefer Jezerah, the work attributed by the Hebrew Kabbalists to their patriarch Abraham first, the book of the Shu King, China's primitive Bible, the sacred volumes of the Egyptian Thoth, Hermes, the Puranas in India, and the Chaldean book of Numbers, and the Pentateuch itself are all derived from that one small parent volume. Tradition says that it was taken down in Senzar, the secret sacerdotal tongue, from the words of the divine beings, who dictated it to the sons of light in Central Asia at the very beginning of the fifth hour race. For there was a time when its language, the Sensa, was known to the initiates of every nation. When the forefathers of the Toltec understood it as easily as the inhabitants of the lost Atlantis, who inherited it in their turn from the sages of the third race, the Manushis, who learned it direct from the Devas of the second and the first races. Secret Doctrine 1. Preface.
Yes, so you can see it's been around forever. It's been stated, restated for every race, every sub-race of every race. And many times within these sub-races, depending on the culture, right? So Hermes was one of many, and a very important one of many. DK describes him as a forerunner of the Christ in this particular way of being a, what did he call him? A messenger of the light, I believe it was. So yes. Okay. The final and much longer subsection.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, okay.
Hold on just a minute. I'm having a little trouble with my mute, so I'm sorry. Greg says Taoism might be associated with the construct of the way via the Eastern Asian teachings that form in part the foundation of Tibetan Buddhism, Hinduism, and Chinese Taoism. Tao literally means the way. And then he says, can we also speculate that the Lord of the Fire, Agni, is representative of this transformation described here, emerging out of the first and second rays?
Okay, well, two statements, right? Yeah, whenever you have a master of wisdom incarnate, there's going to be a direct access to the hierarchical archives. And if they have incarnated to be an avatar for that race, then the translation will be appropriate to that culture, right? And so the Tao certainly was this, formidable teaching of that era in China, right? And then your question about Agni, I didn't quite get a question out of that. Say it again. What was his reference to Agni?
Can we also, go ahead, Greg.
I was just reading in terms of what we just read in this last section. There's the next one, the next page, right here. There's this reference in Sensar, the secret sacerdotal tongue from the words of the divine beings. And then you go down to the very bottom and you see that from the sages of the third race, the Manushis, who learnt it direct from the Devas of the second and first races. And this is prior to, when I think of the third race, I think of the Lemurians, and the Atlanteans become the fourth root race. But in terms of the third root race, we're dealing with the manifestation of Sanat Kumara as the physical incarnation takes form and brings the fire of the mind to the savage peoples,
right,
of the Lemurians.
Right. Yeah. So, he's basically, she's just tracing it back to this pivotal time in the third subrace of the Lemurian race, when mind was made available to humanity, and that was done by the Manushis. And in this, you're talking about Lucifer, all the myths of the fire bringers would have to do, with this reference. But even then, she takes it further back. Who learned it? These Manushis of the third race. You're already 21 million years back. And then she says, who learned it? Direct from the Devas of the second and first races, who were formless races, did not incarnate as we think of it at all. They were formless from our point of view, even though they did take on a form. There are some descriptions of this that describe them as amorphous beings. So even at that time, when you wouldn't imagine that humanity could benefit from these teachings at all, nonetheless, these sages of the third race learned it from the Devas of those even earlier races, right? And it wouldn't even stop there. You would go to the previous chain in order to pick up the thread from before, because the thing is, it's timeless on the inner planes. It doesn't get lost, archaeologically, because it's permanently in the archives of the hierarchy. So, and any avatar can access it and re-access it based on his purpose. Okay, thanks, Greg. Good thoughts there.
And then we have a question from Eleonora. She asked, did you color those tarot keys?
I have my own deck, which I have colored, but let's see, where are they? Oh, there they are. Yeah, these I did not do these. These are, in other words, this isn't a photo of my deck, even though I do have this deck. I spent a holiday in Hawaii coloring the tarot when everybody else was down on the beach. But yeah, the idea is that you must be familiar with the Bota deck, which comes just outline form. And the idea is that by coloring them yourselves, and they give you guides as to what colors to use, you personalize them and they become more powerful as a result. Plus, it's the most esoteric deck that I've found. There are elements in the Crowley deck that are really powerful and esoteric. I never use it for any kind of reading because of Crowley's connection with the dark side, so to speak, right? But, you know, it was really Lady Frida Harris that painted them. And there's some fabulous symbology in them, but I use them tangentially. I do the reading with this, the Boda deck, and then I will reference the Crowley deck. Okay.
And then Greg says the Voyager deck is amazing if anyone is interested.
Okay, there you go. All right, shall we go on? I was about to introduce this. The final and much longer subsection is entitled Poimandra, the Vision of Hermes. Unlike any subject that we've studied so far, after an introduction by MPH, this subsection consists entirely of original source material. So could we get a reader, please, for this?
Scott, can you read that, please?
This is his introduction to the material. And then we have 2 or 3 pages, folio pages of the material itself. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, this is an astonishing.
Yeah.
subsection. Just blow your mind. The divine, don't you agree? It's just out there.
It's wonderful. And I'm in the middle of trying to translate it, you know, or provide insights about it for you. It's quite a job.
Wow.
Yeah.
The divine Poimandra of Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus is one of the earliest of the Hermetic writings now extant. While probably not in its original form, having been remodeled during the first centuries of the Christian era and incorrectly translated since, this work undoubtedly contains many of the original concepts of the Hermetic cultus. The divine Poimandra consists of 17 fragmentary writings gathered together and put forth as one work. The second book of the divine Poimandra, called Poimandres, or the Vision, is believed to describe the method by which the divine wisdom was first revealed to Hermes. It was after Hermes had received this revelation that he began his ministry, teaching to all who would listen the secrets of the invisible universe as they had been unfolded to him.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so first up, the divine Poimandra of Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus is one of the earliest of the Hermetic writings now extant. Dr. Everard, who was the first to translate the book into English, concurs. His opening words are, "Judicious reader, this book may justly challenge the first place for antiquity from all the books in the world, being written some hundreds of years before Moses' time, as I shall endeavor to make good." That's what they sounded like in 1650. Next, while probably not in its original form, having been remodeled during the first centuries of the Christian era, this work undoubtedly contains many of the original concepts. So given the zealous stamping out of all sources other than church doctrine, to me, it seems a miracle that this great work survived at all. Kind of, you know, at the level of Pistis Sophia in terms of how miraculous it is that it survived. The Time Life book, Ancient Wisdom and the Secret Sex, states, scholars point out that little in the text is truly original. In fact, much of the Hermetic worldview is grounded in the philosophy of Plato. Fair enough, but Plato was the last of the direct line of masters that originated with Zoroaster and Hermes. So finding similarity between Hermes and Plato's teaching doesn't mean that the ideas found in the divine Poimandra originated in Plato's time. In the April 1937 issue of his monthly letter, MPH puts forth another idea. Can we get a reader?
Vivian, can you read that, please?
The Hermetic books now known are probably only late versions of older writings. The divine Poimandra which is the most important of the Hermetic fragments, does not seem to have been known earlier than the 2nd century AD. This has led to the belief that the Hermetic books were actually written after the beginning of the Christian era by a scholar or a group of scholars profoundly versed in ancient law and tradition. It seems to me, however, that there is a deep inspirational quiddity, inherent nature or essence about these writings, which suggests a high and sacred origin. They are too noble intrinsically to be the production of ordinary mortals. It seems more likely that the older works were fading from the memory of man, and an effort was made to preserve this memory and save the old wisdom from disappearing entirely under the pressure of early Christian proselytizing. Yes. LEH is monthly letter.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. At any rate, there is no doubt, at least for modern theosophists, that Hermes lived and wrote, since DK mentions him 16 times, describing him in externalization of the hierarchy as he who with the words, "I am the light of the world," initiated the process of enlightenment for the Aryan race. Okay, next, the reference to the 17 fragmentary writings. Here's a list of the 18 treatises contained in the Everard translation, all written as dialogues, many between Hermes and his son, Thoth. Originally, only the first of these treatises was called the Divine Pymander, but eventually it became the name of this set of dialogues from the Corpus Hermeticum. And next, the second book of the Divine Pymander, called Poimandres, or the Vision, is believed to describe the method by which the divine wisdom was first revealed to Hermes. The Vision is a dramatic and arresting encounter between the Egyptian master Hermes and the divine dragon of wisdom called Pymander, which MPH describes in the next paragraph. Finally, we learned that Hermes' vision transformed his life. He immediately wrote it down and then spent the remainder of his life teaching what he had learned from Pymander through that vision. In fact, as noted by MPH in his Horizon magazine, the essential elements in Hermes' vision can be found in the Pistis Sophia, the Descent of Ishtar, the Dionysian mysteries, and it even seems to form the foundation for parts of the Apocalypse, St. John. MPH describes the underlying similarities of these different iterations of the mysteries in another Horizon article. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
Sure. In such ancient writings as the Divine Pymander of Hermes and the account of Ishtar's descent through the 7 gates, each of the planets bestowed a faculty or power upon the human soul as it descended into incarnation from the sphere of the fixed stars of the zodiac. These 7 gifts were successive degrees of limitations. They were called bodies, vestments, or adornments, but by each of them, the soul was more closely united with the principle of matter. This investiture constituted the symbolic fall and ended when the elements bestowed the physical body.
Thank you. So, any thoughts on anything in this paragraph? All right, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Dia, can you read that, please?
The Vision is the most famous of all the Hermetic fragments and contains an exposition of a Hermetic cosmogony and the secret sciences of the Egyptians regarding the culture and unfoldment of the human soul. For some time, it was erroneously called the Genesis of Enoch, but that mistake has now been rectified. At hand, while preparing the following interpretation of the symbolic philosophy concealed within the vision of Hermes, the present author has had these reference works. The Divine Pymander of Hermes, Mercurius Trismegistus, London, 1650, translated out of the Arabic and Greek by Dr. Everhard. Hermetica, Oxford, 1924, edited by Walter Scott Hermes. Hermes, The Mysteries of Egypt, Philadelphia, 1925, by Edouard Schur, and The Thrice Great Hermes, London, 1906, by G.R.S. Mead. To the material contained in the above volumes, he has added commentaries based upon the esoteric philosophy of the ancient Egyptians, together with amplifications derived partly from other Hermetic fragments and partly from the sacred arcanum of the Hermetic sciences. For the sake of clarity, the narrative form has been chosen in preference to the original dialogic style, and obsolete words have been given place to those in current use.
Thank you. Okay, first, the vision is the most famous of the Hermetic fragments and contains an exposition of Hermetic cosmogony and the secret sciences of the Egyptians regarding the culture and unfoldment of the human soul. This excerpt gives us some idea of the teachings on the soul in ancient Egypt. Can we get a reader, please?
Eleanor, can you read that, please?
Sure. And the governors bowed down to the man who had been fashioned, the metaphysical man, who had no body, but was all soul. And each of the governors bestowed upon the man, one of his qualities, so that he gained inwardly 7 natures, which were gifts of the gods of the 7 worlds. Now this divine man, gazing down into the deep, saw the physical world as though it were a mirror or a smooth ocean. And he beheld his own likeness shadowed in the deep. And like Narcissus in the Greek legend, he became enamored of his own shadow and desired to descend onto it. Thus, desire came into being, and with desire came the fulfillment of it. For that which mind desires, it accomplishes. And the man descended into the abyss. He entered into the shadow, and the shadow entered into him. And the mind, which had been above the mystery, became part of the mystery. And the lower world received the mind. And the creatures of the abyss became mindful. And the man forgot his kinship with the light and began to struggle outwardly to gain that which was its own inner nature.
Thank you. I tell you, there's some real jewels in these magazines. Unfortunately, they're not read much, if at all, anymore, but I find them extraordinary sources. Okay, next, for some time, it was erroneously called the Genesis of Enoch, but that mistake has now been rectified. Enoch was a Jewish patriarch professed to be the grandfather of Noah. The book of Enoch, oft quoted in the Pistis Sophia, became part of the Old Testament. Copies of this book were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It says here, God took Enoch, as in Genesis 5:24, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. It's interesting. He was not, for God took him. It's a 1728 illustration from the Bible. So and many historians equate Hermes with Enoch. Clearly MPH is not one of them. Okay, next, MPH lists his source materials. Pictured here, these are the sources that he used to weave this narrative, right? Took just the best of each and cross-reference them in order to read the narrative that we'll be reading over the next 2.5 pages. He then tells us that he will use a modern narrative style to relate the content of the divine Pymander. This revelation by Pymander to Hermes is a fully developed cosmogony, which is remarkable in its similarity to modern theosophy, but there are puzzling differences. Before we dive into this narrative, which continues through this and the next 2 pages, this is the narrative, we're starting here, and it goes through the entire rest of the chapter of the folio edition, and to enhance our appreciation for the translation into narrative style that MPH has created, let's take a brief look, or a briefer look, at Everard's original translation into English. Could we get a reader for these verses, please? Verses 1 through 5 from the beginning of book 2.
Andrea, can you read that, please?
Yep. 1. My understanding lifted up, all my bodily senses being exceedingly holden back, as it is with them that are very heavy of sleep, by reason either of fullness of meat or of bodily labor. Me thought I saw one of an exceeding great stature, and in infinite greatness, call me by my name, and say unto me, what wouldest thou hear and see? Or what wouldest thou understand, to learn and know? 2. Then said I, who art thou? I am, quoth he, Pomander, the mind of the great Lord, the most mighty and absolute emperor. I know what thou wouldest have, and I am always present with thee. 3. Then said I would learn the things that art and understand the nature of them and know God. How? Said he. I answered that I would gladly hear. Then he, have me again in thy mind, and whatsoever thou wouldst learn, I will teach thee. 4. When he had thus said, he was changed in his idea or form, and straightway, in the twinkling of an eye, all things were opened unto me, and I saw an infinite sight. All things were becoming light, both sweet and exceedingly pleasant, and I was wonderfully delighted in the beholding it. 5. But after a little while, there was a darkness made in part, coming down obliquely, fearful and hideous, which seemed unto me to be changed into a certain moist nature, unspeakably troubled, which yielded a smoke as from fire, and from whence proceeded a voice unutterable and very mournful, but inarticulate, insomuch that it seemed to have come from the light. The Divine Pomander, Book 2.
Thank you. Nicely read. So, there's a certain style to this 1650 translation. And if you like it and you want to read more, this is easily found online. Just Everard is the key word here, Divine Pomander, Everard, and you'll be able to pull up a PDF of this book. Just a moment. Okay, let's begin the narrative that we only have like 6 minutes, but we can get into it a little bit. That MPH extracted from, again, these 4 sources, right? Conflated them in a way that allowed for a storytelling style. So without further ado, let's go ahead.
Hermes, while wandering in a rocky and desolate place, gave himself over to meditation and prayer. Following the secret instructions of the temple, he gradually freed his higher consciousness from the bondage of his bodily senses, and, thus released, his divine nature revealed to him the mysteries of the transcendental spheres. He beheld a figure, terrible and awe-inspiring. It was the great dragon with wings stretching across the sky and light streaming in all directions from its body. The mysteries taught that the universal life was personified as a dragon. The great dragon called Hermes by his name and asked him why he thus meditated upon the world mystery. Terrified by the spectacle, Hermes prostrated himself before the dragon, beseeching it to reveal its identity. The great creature answered that it was Poimandres, the mind of the universe, the creative intelligence, and the absolute emperor of all. Shur identifies Poimandres as the god Osiris. Hermes then besought Poimandres to disclose the nature of the universe and the constitution of the gods. The dragon acquiesced, bidding Trismegistus hold its image in his mind.
Thank you, BL. So, dramatic introduction. Wandering in a desolate place brings to mind Jesus's sojourn in the desert, a natural choice for freeing his higher consciousness from the bondage of bodily senses. We see this type of setting often when initiates attempt to gain vision of the higher realms. For insight into temple instruction, let's take a look at G.R.S. Mead's Thrice Great Hermes. Could we get a reader, please?
Karen, can you read that, please?
The inner doors of the temple were thrown wide open to the Ami Ha'aretz, people of the land, but the innermost door still remained closed, for it is a door that is not man-made. It opens into the within of things, and not into some inner court of formal instruction. The door still remained naturally closed to the unworthy and unknowing, but no scribe or Pharisee of the established order of things could any longer keep the key thereof in his selfish hands. The key was given to all, but given still mystically, for it is hidden in the inner nature of each son of man. And if he seek not in himself, searching into the depths of his own nature, he will never find it. The key is the opener of the gate of gnosis, the gate of the gnosis.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, next, MPH describes the great dragon, a personification of the universal life. Let's get a reader for this secret doctrine quote.
Martha, can you read that, please?
The primitive symbol of the serpent symbolized divine wisdom and perfection, and had always stood for psychical regeneration and immortality. Hence, Hermes calling the serpent the most spiritual of all beings. Moses initiated in the wisdom of Hermes, following suit in Genesis. The Gnostics' serpent with the 7 bowls over its head, being the emblem of the 7 hierarchies of the septenary or planetary creators. Hence also the Hindu serpent, Sesha or Ananta, the infinite, a name of Vishnu whose first viand or vehicle on the primordial waters is this serpent. Secret Doctrine 1, page 73.
Thank you, Martha. So after calling Hermes by name, the great dragon identified itself as Poimander, the mind of the universe. So the secret doctrine gives us a little bit of insight into this. If you pay close attention, you'll see it unfold during this first part. Can we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Scott, please. Scott?
I'm getting there.
Oh.
Very fact that adaptations do occur, that the fittest do survive in the struggle for existence, shows that what is called unconscious nature is in reality an aggregate of forces manipulated by semi-intelligent beings, elementals, guided by high planetary spirits, Diane Johans, whose collective aggregate forms the manifested verbum of the unmanifested logos, and constitutes at one and the same time the mind of the universe and its immutable law, the secret doctrine. Simon teaches that the root of all things bifurcated into two powers. Of these, the one appears above and is the great power, the mind of the universe, directing all things male. The other appears below, the great thought, female, producing all things. Hence, being thus ranged one against the other, they form a zizgia, a pair, copula, and make manifest the intermediate interval, the incomprehensible air. In this air is the Father, supporting all things. Natural Genesis.
Okay, so there's your ebony and ivory, the pair, at that level of the Buddhic, right?
Yeah.
The father and mother aspects. Okay. Next, Shure identifies Pymander as the god Osiris. Unfortunately, I was unable to find Hermes, The Mysteries of Egypt by Edward Shure in PDF form. So instead, we'll turn again to G.R.S. Mead, who says simply, Osiris is the heavenly man, the Logos. Not only so, but in straightest connection with this tradition, we have an exposition of the Hermes doctrine. So again, you have one of those things of, is Thoth Osiris, or is he the scribe of Osiris, right? It's in a sense the same. Next, Hermes then besought, actually we're out of time, but I'm going to finish this, besought Pymander to disclose the nature of the universe and the constitution of the gods. Since the Egyptian gods personify the constitution of the universe, that's their nature. They're not personal gods. They personify aspects of the universe. What he was really asking for, Hermes, was access to the Akasha, or rain cloud of knowable things, as personified by the Egyptian gods. And then finally, the dragon acquiesced, bidding Trismegistus hold its image in his mind. This is an interesting detail. Since the dragon or divine mind contains both the divine ideation and its articulated creation, we might hypothesize that the held image of the dragon activated Hermes' intuition. It's a magical form, right? A door that transcended the separation between Hermes, the outer expression, and Thoth, his archetypal self. Okay, so that we'll start here next time. And thank you all for coming today. You want to give dates?
Yeah. The next Secret Teaching of All Ages is going to be the August 7th at 7 p.m. But of course, before that, we're going to have the Secret Doctrine in 2 weeks on July 17th at 7 p.m.
GMT time.
Yes.
And we have another one coming up.
Oh, yeah.
It's this Friday and at 5 p.m., 2 hours earlier, GMT. I think that's 10 o'clock PDT. And 1 o'clock on the East Coast. And then, so that's this coming Friday. So hope to see you there. We kicked off the series last time. So it would be great if you want to join us. So
yeah, the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series. You didn't name it.
Oh.
He's doing that now on the second and fourth Fridays, right?
Treatise on Cosmic Fire. We're actually starting at page 77, where he takes up the etheric body and prana. It's just amazing material from DK. And it's not too difficult. Some people just go blank when you say Treatise on Cosmic Fire, but we take it at a pace to make it really understandable. So I think you would find it quite interesting. So anyway, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.